Hey there beautiful people, how's everything? Just a little heads up before we start the video. First, yes, there's going to be spoilers regarding the work being discussed. But hold up a second, before you throw your Wi-Fi router or cell phone out of the window, let me just say something. Although I may reveal some plot points, like the fact that Bruce Willis is a ghost in Die Hard, or that John Wick goes back in time to avoid flunking history.
No way!
The whole emotional impact, the quality of the story, and the relevance of the events will be maintained. So it won't be that much of a problem if you know a thing or two beforehand. In other words, the intent of this video is not to tell the plot, but to use it as a way to approach the themes that the story addresses. So if you have already seen, played or read whatever it is we are talking about and realize that I left out some details, that's the reason. Although, rest assured, if you decide to leave this video for later, I'll understand. I mean it. I'll still love you. Second, if you really want it, I'd love that you like this video, share it and subscribe, as well as follow on Twitter and Instagram. It would mean the world to me, really, but then again, only if you feel like it.
At least to me, online games were always fascinating. The notion that a gigantic world would be populated not only by characters from the game, but also by other people, just like you, each playing the game at its own way, seemed to me, as I said, fascinating. But for reasons that involved a bad connection and having to pay a fee, my contact with those games was limited to occasional rounds of Ragnarok Online, Gunbound, and mainly Grand Chase, forming the holy trinity of online games for middle-class children in Brazil. Okay, there was also this game called The Duel, but I wasn't cool enough to play it. In the ocean of online games, one of them rose above the rest, thanks to its peculiar visual style and a more tactic-like gameplay, a game called Dofus. Developed by the French company Ankama and released in 2004, the game is set in the world of 12, which is named after the 12 gods that rule over it, each one representing one race. The game received global notoriety for the deep yet friendly combat system and for its original presentation and plot. But being quite honest, one of the reasons behind its popularity was the fact that it was made using the Flash toolset. Well, one may say that even a toaster could run it. Thanks to the success, Ankama could fulfill its desire of addressing the story through other means, creating a transmedia universe where the myths and narratives of the game would be expanded in comic books, manga, and animations. And in 2008, the studio would try something unheard of, creating a cartoon, made entirely by them, showing the events that happened after the game Wakfu, which, by that time, had not even been released, and would be set in the same world of Dofus, a couple hundred years in the future. It may not sound huge, but hear me out. The studio would make the whole animation, entirely with Flash, which is known for shows that, let's say, lack quality, dealing with a plot that not even its oldest fans would be familiar. Would it be possible for a show, made by a game company, based on the events of a game that was not even released, made in Flash, be any good? Well, not only it can, but it is, and you don't even need to know anything about the games nor the comic books. Wakfu is a series that deserves to be put next to the titans, such as Avatar, Dragon Prince, and even Madoka. Just a second, normally I wouldn't tell you what you should or should not do, I don't pay your bills. But with Wakfu, if you can, watch it in French, please do it for me. I'll address the why later. So, having said that, let's talk about how the show manages to be amazing. Just like the longest journeys, Wakfu starts simple, it starts calm. It begins in a small inn, located in an equally small town, called Emelka. In that place, together with Alibert, his adoptive father, lives Hugo, a young boy that sees his life forever change when, at the age of 12, finds out he can create portals. You know that gun from the game Portal? Just like that, but using the hands. When destiny figuratively and sort of literally breaks through his door, Hugo goes with a peculiar group of people to the island that holds the answer of his past. And I'm going to stop here, because by using those words, you can get the impression that the show is nothing but another one in the sea of many fantasy tales, which would be quite incorrect. Even though the cartoon has some aspects that are like other works, such as the child with a mysterious power and great destiny, and the journey with a colorful group of people in a reasonably recognizable fantasy world, the series uses those characteristics as a starting point for a really unique tale. The main group is an excellent example of that. Take Yugo, he could easily be a generic character in a shonen anime, just another Naruto, screaming catchphrases and going straight to the combat, or, like the classic saga of Dragon Ball, an innocent and sorta dumb child. But he's a genuinely kind and easygoing person with a delicate talent for culinary. And that does not stop him from being occasionally sarcastic, funny, or even insecure. It wouldn't be that wrong to refer to him as a malin, which is a French word for someone who is, let's say, smart and cunning. In other words, he's a little bit innocent, but not stupid. It's relevant to mention that Yugo's story is being written as the narrative goes forward. You can see throughout the episodes how the character grows, matures, and becomes a more fully realized person. And well, if we are going to use the title of shonen character, it certainly goes to Tristepan, or Pampan, as everybody calls him. I'm going to be using the French names, so in case I refer to a character in a way that you're not familiar, there's no need to panic. In his case, the title rings true. He's the character with the cool weapon that screams and goes straight to the combat. But the cartoon not only ridicules his behavior, showing how acting without thinking is not always the best answer, but also strongly criticizes the toxicity that said way of being can bring to oneself and to those around. We also have the character of Amalia, princess of the Salida, kingdom and people, who, thanks to a mysterious and prophetic dream, left her kingdom towards her destiny. Something quite interesting about her is how she is in constant conflict with herself. She wants to prove to be more than a spoiled lady that was born rich and powerful. At the same time, by being a spoiled lady that was born rich and powerful, she struggles to accept that the world does not gravitate around her, and things will not be the way she wants. So much so that the series heavily implies that her mysterious and prophetic dream was a lie told to avoid a discussion with her family. And since the princess left in an irresponsible adventure, her personal guard came along. That's why we can count with the presence of Evangeline. Eva is a peculiar character in the sense that her personality is a reflection of her relationship with Amalia. She has been, for her entire life, remarkably close to the princess, but not because it was her desire. Quite frankly, it was her job. But it doesn't mean that there's not an extremely strong bond between them. They do care a lot about each other. It's just that it was a relationship born out of duty, and it didn't get a chance to grow. With that in mind, Evangeline starts her journey being very formal and somewhat contained. So, as we see her relationship with Amalia being gradually less sustained by duty and more by friendship, we can notice that she begins to feel more at ease with herself and with those around her. There's a scene that shows this quite well. It's the moment when Amalia demands to be treated as equal, culminating with Evangeline deciding that both can s'y tutoyer.
D'accord, je te promets de vous tutoyer.
Let me explain. In French, we have two pronouns that can be used to refer to the person you're speaking to, the tu and vous, each meaning a different kind of you. Tu carries informality and implies intimacy with whomever you're speaking. It's also strictly singular, referring to just one person. Vous, meanwhile, is used when you need formality or when you are referring to a group of people. With that in mind, s'y tutoyer means that people involved in a conversation decided to use tu, which means informality and, in a way, intimacy. So, when Eva and Amalia decided to s'y tutoyer, the first step is taken for the relationship to be carried uniquely by the affection and care that they have for each other. Last, but not least, we have Joel. Most of his conflicts exist because he tries to break the barriers that were built by him during his life. Being an example of that, the way a selfish and greedy person that he is faces a journey which is, by its essence, altruistic. You guys may realize that I dedicated more time talking about the characters than the plot. I didn't do it randomly, the series does the same thing. After the first 3 episodes, the plot takes a break so that we can spend time with the characters and the world they live in, coming back only at episode 15. After those 15 initial episodes, you may not know where the story goes, but you will understand who those people are, and will comprehend their conflicts, their qualities, and more importantly, that they care deeply for each other. Even in the dumbest episodes, nope, especially in the dumbest episodes, the world is really well explored. We have an episode that deals with a baker competition. It's something without great risks or relevance for the larger world or plot. However, through that short adventure, you understand not only that this world produces food in a not so different way than ours, but by being a competition that attracts people from many different places, we end up having a small glimpse of the different habits and cultures of the land. And hey, you also find out that a humanoid monster made of croissant is something plausible, not unlike our reality. It's really interesting to see the quite elegant ways that the series shows us the structure of its society. It will never force you to hear a long, expositive dialogue to explain things that the characters, by inhabiting the world, already know. But look, I'm not gonna lie, this series is not perfect. We can use the 4th episode as a way to demonstrate how not all adventures have the same level of quality, which, guys, honestly, if you wish to skip it or something like that, I will not judge you. In that story, Tristepan gets stuck in a tower with princes that were cursed with ugliness, and the crew has to save him. It kinda sorta contributes to the development of Eva realizing that she's cute, but it's weak, guys, it's weak. Well, but besides that, when we see the Wakfu franchise as a whole, those initial episodes serve as a contrast to what the characters will face in the future. In a way, you think about them with nostalgia. There's a game called Neverwinter Nights 2. You don't have to know anything about it, except that by the end you'll be punching divine creatures in the face. But before that, way before that, your adventures will be simple, in a small scale. They will be, in a way, ordinary. The first part of Wakfu has a similar feeling, a simple beginning of an epic tale. Only that, by episode 15, things change. After spending so much time making us getting used to the world and the characters, the series decides to put everyone and everything in danger. After finally reaching the island, the characters discover a few things. Firstly, they find the dragon that 12 years ago, and using a humanoid form, delivered Yugo to the care of his adoptive father. It is also revealed that Yugo is part of an ancient and lost race, the Eliatre. Oh, and Yugo now has a sassy dragon brother called Adamai. Outside of those revelations, the group is attacked by the story's main villain, Nox. And I avoided mentioning him until now, because he deserves a moment just for himself. Nox is a character with an excellent design and mannerism. Being a time magician, his powers allow him to alter the flow of time, and his gestures, even though it may sound bizarre, have a clockwork feeling. You can almost feel that his movements are powered by cords and gears, not that different from an old clock. Oh, and his wandering fortress is a gigantic clock with legs. Let's be honest, it's objectively cool. Nox is also absurdly well written and acted, taking the stage every single time he appears. Instead of his madness being something cool so that he can be popular with the cool kids, we can see there is a way of dealing with something really dark from his past, and with the nature of his actions. Have you ever heard that we must laugh instead of crying? Well, Nox needed to become mad so he wouldn't become desperate. He is shown as someone that fully comprehends how awful his actions are, but also believes deeply that his end goal will fix everything. I noticed that I didn't say what he does, so let's go. The Wakfu, which gives the series its name, it's the life energy which everything that is, in one way or another, alive carries. Nox has spent the last couple of centuries leeching the Wakfu and the life of many different things, using a lost artifact of the Eliatre people, the Eliacube.
Mais j'y pense, ne voudrais-tu pas faire don de ton Wakfu au cube? Et ainsi me permettre de gagner un peu de temps.
You know how in Avatar people can bend the elements of nature? So, someone that holds the power of the Eliacube can bend time and space. Knowing that dragons are beings of great mighty and absolute power, Nox initiates a combat with, let's go, Krugaloragran, which is the name of the dragon, to try to kill him and take his Wakfu. Personally, I use 3 different criteria to analyze an action scene. First, we have the visual spectacle. It would be how well the combat is presented. It's worth reminding that it does not mean grandiosity. A well-choreographed fistfight between 2 regular people can be way more exciting than an awful combat between divine creatures. Second is the relevance of the plot. I'm not saying that every single combat needs to be a matter of life and death for the characters or the world, but having importance helps. And last, we have the unpredictability. When you have a fight between the random character and the one with the plot armor, who do you think is going to win? A fight that you constantly guess who will be victorious, one that involves 2 characters with equal chances of victory, grabs your attention way more than, oh, look how the main character has won, again. At least to me, our work does not need to fulfill all 3 requirements to have a good scene. Take a look at the excellent hardcore Henry, fully shot in first person. Since we are constantly in the protagonist's eyes, there's a strong guarantee that he will survive, without even counting that his name is in the title. Besides the fact that the clashes against the regular enemies are, in general, not that important for the plot. However, the spectacular and original way that the movie shows its combat makes it an excellent work of art for those who wish to see well-made action scenes. Let's talk about another movie, the raid, Redemption. Even though it actually fulfills the requirements, it's in the unpredictability that its initial moments shine. Since you do not know which characters are important for the plot, when they start dying quite suddenly, the viewer is always caught by surprise. Now, the reason why I mentioned those aspects, aside from the fact that, well, it's my video, is because in Wakfu, the fights rarely do not meet at least one of those points. Things almost never stay the same after a fight. While it is incredibly fun to watch a well-choreographed fight, with cool techniques and a lot of, well, pretty lights, the fact that there's a strong chance that the people will leave the combat different from when they started makes everything more interesting. And that, in a certain way, represents the series as a whole. It has everything that one can expect from a fantasy adventure with action and drama, but it also goes the extra mile and manages to do it in a unique and exceptional fashion. And far from there, the heroes are informed by an ancestral technique learned from watching The Lion King that the next target is a Tree of Life, a literal tree that every single Saga in the world has a connection, which the severance would mean death. In order to solve this crisis, the now called Brotherhood of Tofu, named after those little fellas, separates in two groups. Adamai and Yugo go after a relevant item to the plot, while the rest goes to the Saga Kingdom to prepare it for the battle. And what did I say? After spending many episodes building characters and the world, the series becomes a race against time to avoid the genocide of a people by the hands of someone that fully comprehends how heinous it would be, but will do it for what it considers the greater good. And the best part, from there, it only gets better. We have the journey of the two brothers that, besides being a pretext for Yugo's training, it doubles as a way to make them bound, and it also allows us to learn a little bit more about Adamai. Even though he has a more sarcastic and ironic manner, he doesn't hide his worries and insecurities with the future, particularly since it's the first time he makes contact with the world outside his island and by not having his parental figure close by. Now, with the rest of the group, something quite interesting happens, especially with Pampan and Evangeline. You can see the beginning of an actual relationship, and it's made in an honest and elegant manner, you know? There's a certain flirt here, a wordplay there. You understand how genuine the affection between them is. You also get to understand how close it was to end. When arriving at the Saga Kingdom, we find that the king is absent and the one in charge is Amalia's brother, Prince Armand, who has the striking characteristic of being a complete jerk. It is interesting to see how he is a version of Amalia with bad breath and a lack of self-criticism. He's the kind of person that believes he will inherit his family's fortune not by chance, but because he earned it. We'll talk more about him later. For now, all that matters is that he is really into Eva and that makes Pampan jealous. And well, you remember that I mentioned how the series shows that inconsequential behavior in a negative light? So, thanks to an extremely stupid discussion between the guys, the situation scales in a way where a friendly brawl culminates with Pampan losing his head and attacking everybody, especially Evangeline. Pampan comes back to himself and, not believing what he just did, runs away. Now the group splits again. Yugo and Adamai are still quite distant. Eva and Amalia try, somehow, to reach the Tree of Life and speak with the king, who is arrested for being with a dangerous armed and red-headed individual. And Pampan, well, he's unconscious and in some desert. Speaking about him, he's a Yop. In the world of Wakfu, the Yops are a race known for having a heart generally in the right place and a particularly empty brain. Pampan does not go very far from the definition. He's a person that prefers to act than to talk, mainly because he's not as talented with words as he is with action. Therefore, I ask you, how do you think that the series presents Pampan dealing with the events that happen? Whatever it is that you have guessed, there's a considerable chance that it wasn't correct, because it does like this. Yep, I could not believe it either. Seeing two characters dancing tango is, by itself, super cool. By being a person of actions, not words, it's evident that the inner confrontation of his feelings would be presented through an action that would help him express himself, in this case, with a dance.
Pourquoi t'as cassé mon arc?
And just like that, the fantasy ends and reality returns. In this moment, the plot dedicates some time for Pampan to have an opportunity to question his attitudes and, before asking for forgiveness for his mistakes, starts redeeming himself. I do believe to be relevant to mention that, in a situation more directly relevant to the events of the plot, Eva also has the opportunity to face her feelings through dreams. Actually, the reason why I dedicated some paragraphs to mention the dreams of both characters is to demonstrate the talent that the story shows when addressing feelings. Understanding exactly how that we feel when we love someone is something comprehensively complicated. Now, imagine talking or writing about it. Look, I'm even having a hard time putting those words in the script. Getting close to someone, becoming intimate, and allowing the birth of a relationship gives margin to millions of conflicting emotions. You start to like the presence of a person, wishing that they were with you, both physically and emotionally. But you also start to see the negative aspects of the person you care about, from silly things to deeper behaviors that can hurt. As well as you start to have your negative aspects seen and felt. You find out that, unfortunately, you are capable of hurting someone. For all the flaws that this cartoon has, it can delve in subjects such as this one in a really nice way, and to me, that counts a lot. Oh, and sorry people, but I couldn't find a better place for this, so I'll just leave it here. There's a peculiar character in the middle of this whole deal, Julith, the ambassador of the Kingdom of Bonta. I really do like his design and how he's presented. The camera constantly makes a malicious zoom in his face and makes you think he'll betray everybody or something like that, when actually he's just a really cool and nice guy. He'll actually be imported later on, don't forget. Well, with the king rescued, the crew reunited, the army ready, and the good luck kiss given, the final battle between the heroes and Nox can begin. The battle is entertaining, there's a lot of fights, explosions, pow, bang, pow, kaboom. But you wanna know something quite interesting? Nox wins. You know Pam? He dies in battle. The super important Tree of Life is destroyed, taking the life of the whole Sadeda people. Yugo and Adamai, they lose. Nox achieves everything he needs and puts his plan in motion. He goes back in time. He did it! He will be happy. He will have his family back. Personally, I like the motivation. It's the kind of thing that you wouldn't do it, but understands why someone else would. Nox does not aim for power or even a legacy. In fact, the only comfort that makes him go forward with his heinous acts is the fact that when it's all said and done, everything will be undone. No victims and no suffering. He won't be Nox anymore, but Noxemilian, father and husband, someone that loves and is loved. Those 200 years of planning were worth it. Everything will be fine. He comes back 20 minutes. Have you ever dedicated your time in something, I mean a lot of time, actually preparing something? Be a work of art, studies, or something similar. All the effort and days, months, or even years of preparations to achieve something that you want or need. I really believe that you have been through all that. The journey that is going after something, believing that you won't make it, putting those thoughts aside and keep going forward. Well, have you ever failed after dedicating time in something? The mighty villain ends like that. Nox, considering that he may have, in fact, gone insane, goes away. The time has gone back, enough to spare the Tree of Life and the Sadeda people. But not Pam. The first season has its end with the characters celebrating the victory and mourning the loss of their friend. Consider now, for an instant, the possibility of being born in an objectively worse reality, in which Wakfu was cancelled and all that we got was this season. Ending the journey with this kind of tone, in such a coherent and finalistic way, not only required a lot of talent, but also courage. And it works, you know that it's not the end, you know we have more stories to tell, this video is long. But the ending is made with so much care that it doesn't lose its relevance when put side by side with the rest of the series, which is quite a feat when you consider that the best is yet to come. But before we talk about what our heroes will find, let's see a story about someone losing himself. There's a really good anime called Kaiba. It's a science fiction epic with a story that by itself makes it worth watching, but of course, it's also worth a watch since it looks like this. I'm talking about Kaiba because the studio responsible for it, with the director of the excellent Devilman Crybaby, made a special episode of Wakfu, one that shows the events that take place before the plot, but works better when seen after the first season. And this episode looks like this. The story of Nox's origin is interesting. Not only because it can be another plot point that you can put in the great Excel sheet with the whole Wakfu lore, but also how it works as a singular entity. This short story about how a sympathetic man gradually loses himself wouldn't be out of place being put in a collection of short stories of writers such as Edgar Allan Poe, in a place between The Pit and the Pendulum and The Telltale Heart. But in the context of the saga, it serves to solidify Nox as a tragic villain, almost a victim of a power that could not be understood, but also a victim of his own greed. Once again, the series shines by putting as the center of its conflict wishes and desires that are humanly comprehensible. Someone that is not familiar with the franchise can, understandably, not really sympathize with the story of how the idea Kerub gave birth to a great magician Excelor. Now, a story of how a person loses himself trying to be admired and respected for what he loves to do. It's easier to sympathize, isn't it? There is a consensus in the gaming world that Uncharted 2, Among Thieves, is one of the best games ever made. Personally, I don't share that opinion. But what I cannot disagree is the fact that the sequence is a clear improvement of its predecessor in every aspect. Something similar happens with the second Mass Effect game, which, although it doesn't share all the mechanics of the original and carries a different vision, the consensus is that the sequel is a positive evolution of the series. What I'm trying to say here is that there are works that happen to be an improvement of their franchises in many aspects. The second season of Wakfu is one such work. From the quality of the animation to the characterization of the characters, the new season takes the best aspects of the first one, mainly the second part, and extends it throughout its 26 episodes. Everything is improved. The rhythm is more pleasant, the dialogue is more refined, and the challenges are more personal. Beyond that, the series shows that the scale of the journey is a little bit bigger, not only because of the dangers, but also because of the notoriety. With moments like when it's shown that Eva has become well known by her people thanks to her feats, or the statue in memory of Tristepan. Being quite honest, Pampan is a curious case of died, but it's fine now, with the beginning of the new saga dedicated to rescuing him. Even the small arc is made with a lot of care and passion, demonstrating how far Eva would be willing to go to have him back. And it's also the narrative hook to something quite peculiar that the show does really well. As I said before, it's the beginning of their relationship. No, nothing the likes of, oh, I don't know, maybe they do like each other, or the I love you be the end of the plot, or even fast forward to the future and then the series shows them together. You actually see them together throughout their relationship, with all the wonders and imperfection that being with someone brings. Another interesting point is how the series dedicates time with characters that did not have the opportunity to highlight their personality. Like Amalia. We now have moments where we can see her more political and diplomatic side as a princess. We see the skill and easiness with which she puts a mantle of royalty over her personality when the situation demands it. You know that friend that is easygoing, funny, or even bohemian, oh, funny word, but when the occasion demands it, knows how to behave with seriousness and all that. That's Amalia. Even with characters that would easily fit in clichés and archetypes, the script presents them with dramas and personalities interesting enough to make them rise in the sea of similar characters. We have Cleofe, introduced later in the season. She's Eva's younger sister, and would surprise you if I said that they have a relationship based on rivalry, that Cleo is more extrovert than Eva, that their ways of fighting and behaving are distinct enough that it wouldn't be wrong to call them opposites. It would be easy, oh so easy, to write Cleofe as just the sister of the character and leave it at that. While I was writing this video script, I had the idea of starting to describe her as everything that Eva is not, but it would be a disservice. Her existence in the plot and the form that she's presented serve the story in many ways. First and quite simply, she's a charismatic character and interacts really well with the rest of the group. Even though her relationship with Eva affects her personality, the influences stop there. Yes, indeed, she is influenced by her sister, but not defined. Another contribution to the story is the solidification that the people of this world are, before being races or classes, just people. Quickly, if I say goblin, do you think about what? I don't like to suppose your behavior, but I do believe that I wouldn't be wrong to say that you thought about a small, dumb and violent creature, one with a considerable lack of self-preservation. But bonus points to those who mention the great jurists of Dungeon Siege 3. Now, if I say French, Brazilian, Kazakh, Vietnamese, there is an incorrect idea which consists of universalizing individuals by their people. Just as it's a mistake to say that all Australians are the same using one as an example, one may think that every single Kha behaves in a way since we only know one, Evangeline. Cleo exists, indirectly, to deconstruct said idea throughout the journey. And talking about the journey, now, more than ever, it carries a personal weight for Hugo. He finds out he's not alone in the world, and that his people need help. Using the artifacts acquired in the first season, Adamai and Hugo managed to bring another Eliatrop to the world. His name is QB. He knows a lot about the past of his people, and is more than happy to share it. And it's not all that surprising that he knows many things about the history of the universe. I mean, QB was there when great part of it was written. We discover, through a stylish and curiously long exposition, a few important things, like the fact that a part of the Eliatrop race is still alive and they are, essentially, refugees from another planet. But what is really relevant is that at least Hugo and QB are immortals. Don't misunderstand me, it's an immortality with an asterisk and a hidden clause. Juridically speaking, it's a kinda lame immortality. They can live for thousands of years, but not forever. Their lives can be ended by the same means that any life can. The difference is that reincarnation is not a supposition, but a guarantee. They may not hold the memories of their past lives, but they have the opportunities of new beginnings. With that in mind, an intriguing situation is created when it's shown that QB is the villain of the season. His objective is surprisingly simple actually. He wants to leave the world and take his people with him. In order to do so, he will use the spaceship that brought them to the planet. The issue is that it needs fuel. However, conveniently, the world where they are would work as an excellent source. Think about Nox's plan to fill the Elia Cube with energy, but in a scale that is, literally, global. But here's the thing, that's the Wikipedia-like description of the character. In order to find what really moves him, we need to try to understand him a little deeper. And with that, one of the first themes of the series becomes clear. Time. Or better yet, how it affects us. While Nox's relation with time was antagonistic, after all, his whole journey was an attempt to overcome it, QB's can be defined as indifferent. When he explained the immortality, he conveniently left an important detail. He gets to keep the memories of his past life. And that kinda changed things a little bit. What defines someone as youngster or elder? One's lifetime? The experience? The biological aspects of one's body? All those ideas and notions, in his case, are completely irrelevant. A moment of his life is something repeatable, cyclical. A desire or objective can take months, decades, or centuries. For him, those measures of time are like counting seconds during the day. Of course, you can notice the importance and weight of each second when you pay attention, but inevitably, they end up passing unnoticed, and when we finally realize, minutes and hours have gone by. Change minutes and hours for days and months. That's the reality of QB. Those around him are born, age, and die, while he stays the same. At least Hugo has a chance to be a new person, a different one with each rebirth. But QB simply continues, always with the notion that no love will last forever and no story nor adventure will truly be everlasting. Therefore, it makes sense that this person wounded by what, through his eyes, could be considered a curse, deeply fears the loneliness that a life such as this one brings. And all that he does ends up being for what he considers the good of his people. And since he needs to feel welcomed by, well, anything, so better be the collective of the only people that can somewhat relate to him. In a battle before what remains of the Eliatrop people, QB is put back in the prison where he came from. An infinity void without beginning nor ending, where time, space, and reason are distant concepts. The second season serves to solidify the series as something memorable. Wherever you look, be character or plot, with rare exceptions, the series will present with care, quality, and humor. In the same season that themes of immortality and nihilism are addressed, we have episodes dedicated to honor the style of Super Sentai, Americanized by the Power Rangers. And I haven't even mentioned the way the relations are explored. So much so that I could dedicate a moment just to talk about the relationship between Evangeline and Pam. Well, and since it's my video, I'm going to do that right now. But to talk about the characters, first we need to talk about, well, how they talk. In other words, about the dub. The reason why I said back there for you people to watch in French is because the English dub is what, in the juridical sphere, we call kinda really bad. It gets better later, but and it's not the old argument, I didn't like the voice of my favorite character. Although it also has that issue, the problem extends to the very text of the English version, which leaves a lot to be desired when compared to the original. In the case of the adaptation, the voices don't feel like they match with the characters, transmitting different personalities from the original, which, by itself, is not a problem. A new and distinct way of speaking can bring something quite interesting to the work being adapted. The problem lies when different is inferior to what was there originally. Let's use Pampin as an example. While in the original material you can perceive the nuances of the character by his way of speaking and the words used, the adaptation makes him a generic action character, with a voice that could be defined just like that. Generic action character. But then you could correctly say, but Chronica, I don't give a damn about those imperialists. I'm going to listen to my native dub. It never lets me down. And you'd be correct. For example, the quality of the Brazilian dubs tends to be so good that sometimes it surpasses the original material. I could point to Little Witch Academia. The dub was so amazing that one may argue that it's better to watch in Portuguese than it is in Japanese. And that sort of repeats here. The quality of the Brazilian version is extremely superior to the English one, but here's the thing, and it can happen in your dub of choice. It uses a text that closely resembles the English adaptation. In other words, interesting details in the original text are lost in translation. But hey, if your choice is between watching a not so nice dub or not watching at all, of course put your favorite dub and be happy. But if you could make an effort, I'd be really glad. So, why talk about the dub? Because most of the great characterization is thanks to the choice of words and the way they are said. When was the last time you saw, played or read a story about a romantic relationship? No, not those stories about the journey to a relationship or the crumbling of one. If you allow me to share an extremely personal opinion, I do believe that one of the few things able to surpass any linguistic or geographic barrier is our universal difficulty to understand ourselves. Of course, in some places there are specific pressures or social expectations intended to make someone be particularly distant or honest with one's emotions. But one of the few things that is true being to Romania or Mexico is that it's a tad bit complicated to understand what we really feel or wish. And if understanding yourself is already tough, imagine trying to understand someone else, comprehending their feelings and pains. After all, it's easier and flashier to fantasize about a possible future relationship or to narrate the ending of one than it is to present the life of people that simply love each other. How many stories address, even tangentially, the routine of a romantic relationship, with all the little things that make it what it is, with all the problems, happiness and subtle changes? Well, Pampin and Evas is one of those. From the intimacy brought by the journey travel, to a little gesture of honest affection, until, finally, a tangible and discreet change in the way they treat each other, we follow their relation becoming gradually closer and stronger. It is shown how each one deals with the feelings that they are carrying, each one at their own peculiar way, but still, always with the same message. They genuinely love each other. What is pretty nice is that it's in a specific moment for the change. We don't have the declaration or the kiss that changes everything. The closest that we have is a kiss that only serves to clarify what they already feel for each other. And that's only the beginning of their life together. Their relevance to the story doesn't change to the couple of the group. They keep their individual importance and growth. The difference is that now, between them, they share both admiration and desire. Their relationship is told in a curiously truthful fashion. What the show remembers, and many forget, is that among moments of strong emotions, both positive and negatives, there is a daily care and affection, small bursts of jealousy, dumb fights, and non-euphoric happiness. Oh, and a surprising detail is that the series goes so far as to insinuate that the two are doing, well, the forbidden dance.
Ouais, Eva, je t'ai déjà vu toute nue, et c'est que t'es pas en rêve.
Comment ça, il t'a déjà vu toute nue?
Oh,
Tu sais, les yops, ils croient voir des choses qu'ils ne voient pas.
Look, I have no problem in being more direct, it's just that YouTube has. I must admit that I didn't expect that being addressed in an equally natural, comic and mature fashion. And all that has a climax in the second season, in a scene that is as simple as it is well done. After all the conflicts get resolved, Pam, having reasons to believe that paternity may not be considerably distant, with a tone of worry and uncertainty asks Eva if they can, and I quote, put a pause on adventuring just for a few months, just to see. Eva accepts. Without using more words than necessary, one thing's certain, their family will get a little bit bigger soon. I love this little scene. Unfortunately, it's one of the moments that lose a bit of its beauty and significance in the different translations. And that is one of the greatest crimes that the adaptation, at least until the present moment, does. They remove those little details, and they're exactly those little details that make the series wonderful. And since we're mentioning the details, I believe it's time, well, to talk about what they lack. Among the many different ways one can tell a story, someone can choose to present everything in the minimal details, explain the past, present, and future of each little thing in the universe. Or, on the other hand, can choose to present little snippets of something bigger, leaving the imagination of whomever is following the story to fill the gaps. Wakfu does both. If there's an event or idea in the series that looks remotely interesting, you can bet that there's a comic, manga, or book presenting a prologue or epilogue, sometimes both. At the same time, you never receive too much information. There are always ambiguous or open-ended details that manage to convey that the events and the people are bigger than the works that contain them. The series almost always manages to handle the balance quite well. Almost. There's the case of Ogrest. It may surprise some people, but Wakfu is an apocalyptic story. No, not post-apocalyptic. Instead of dealing with a dystopic and catastrophic moment of the world, the apocalypse that plagues the land is slower, more localized. It's real enough to be in the minds of the people, but distant enough so that it's not a daily worry. The atmosphere kinda resembles the one in the first Mad Max or the invasion of the Body Snatchers. But instead of wars or aliens, the main danger to this world is water. And that's where the Ogrest chaos comes from. It's an expression casually said in some spots of the first season. It seems, at first, that saying Ogrest chaos, it's similar to my god. However, as time goes by, we are led to believe that many people actually blame Ogrest chaos for the natural disasters that happen in the world. A really strong storm? Ogrest chaos. Landslide? Ogrest chaos. The curious and continuous elevation of the water levels? You can bet on Ogrest chaos. And then, we're introduced to the legend. There was this mighty figure, the Ogrest, who, because he was feeling lonely, cried, and his tears flooded the world. Like many legends, it's simple and curious, and, not different from other legends, has a little bit of truth, but is incomplete. Just like Nox, Ogrest has a special episode dedicated to his origin. Curiously, it has a rhythm and structure quite peculiar when put side by side with the rest of the series, not different from a fairy tale. We have in Ogrest a fearless hero that goes on a journey to bring back to life a sleeping damsel, called Datura. Of course, it's a story with its own and unique characteristics. After all, we're talking about Wakfu. It manages to be as interesting as it is fun, and truly touching sometimes. However, it can't shake the feeling that something's missing. What this special episode presents is nothing more than the prologue, the beginning of a greater tale, one of the greatest in this transmedia universe actually. The problem is that, immediately after in the franchise, we are presented to its epilogue. In the whole Wakfu series, there is not a more direct demonstration of this plot. The closest that we get is an expositive explanation told at the end of another season. In order for you to get properly invested in the characters presented in the tale, and to understand the interesting and tragic story behind the world's catastrophe, you need to go after wikis and other materials. The worst part is that what is trying to be told is something actually intriguing. Knowing that the events that plague the world were moved by greed, lies, and regrets brings an empathic and comprehensible tone to a tale that involves divine beings and the destiny of the world. But hey, we are already delving topics like the destiny of the world and divine creatures. Let's put aside those subjects a little bit and go back to another time. Let's go to a time before Ogrest, Nox, and definitely before Yugo. Let's go to a simpler time, when days were calm and the prices were fair. Just don't forget, you had to know how to bargain. Stories are interesting things. They can shape our vision of the world, inspire us, and even change who we are. But they also are an excellent way of spending a lazy afternoon. In the small and calm little town of Kerub, there's an equally calm store, where you can find incredible things at relatively fair prices, and, if you are lucky, hear a good tale about how the store owner, the retired adventurer Kerub managed to get this item. That's the premise of the series, which happens to be a prelude to Wakfu, Kerub's Bazaar. The vast majority of the episodes revolves around some object that Kerub has in his store, and the telling to his son, the little Jojo, of the events of his life that involve the object. And yes, by Jojo, we are referring to Julith, the mysterious and cool guy from Wakfu has his infancy presented here, long before the events of Wakfu. The series has a really peculiar atmosphere. It's one of the few that I know which manages to convey with perfection the feeling of a small, almost countryside town. No, not talking about Twin Peaks. The world is much bigger than the United States. When I refer to a small town, it's much closer to what we have in places like Brazil and, unsurprisingly, France. Things happen slowly, people know each other by name, and at the end of the afternoon, they put tables and chairs in front of their houses. It even has one of the greatest and proudest symbols of small town from my state in Brazil. People, usually old ladies, that spend their afternoons by the windows, watching and interacting with the movement in the streets. There's a book, also a movie, that reminds me strongly of how this plot goes forward. It's called Epitaph of a Small Winner. In case you're not familiar with, it follows a narration by its main character, Brás Cubas, through the main events of his life. However, it has two unique qualities. The first one is that he's dead. He's far from all the consequences, judgments, and shames of the decisions that he took throughout his life. But it's not the only relevant part. See, Brás Cubas makes his own narration by his own point of view of the events of his own life, and that makes him an unreliable narrator. He may be the one telling the story, but that doesn't mean it happened the way he said. Not that different from Kerub, except by the part of being dead. From the first episodes, we already know that the tales aren't totally true. However, and that's where one of the best parts of the series resides, they also aren't lies. While some adventures are clearly seasoned with more dangerous risks and admires, others are, although a tad bit exaggerated, real enough. They have meanings and lessons. Okay, someone may ask, but what about the plot? Where's the journey? And the answer would be, well, in the past. Kerub has lived a lot, he has been through a lot. And while he's not dead like Brás Cubas, the events that happen are far away enough to be considered from another life. The series takes a quite peculiar angle by showing the character with his journey already traveled. He already became wiser, he already had his character arc, and most definitely already became a better person than he was. Now, to Mr. Kerub, there will only be good business and a calm life. Well, actually, there's kind of a plot, yes. In the very first episode, Kerub finds out that Jojo accidentally hired a maid, Simone, who is responsible for keeping the house in order and literally happy. And yes, the house is alive, and its name is Luis. Okay, we already have the cast and the story so that in each 12 minutes episode, we can watch the world of 12 by the eyes of a kind old man that has lived a lot. Or not. Maybe someone else is sharing a tale or it happens in the present. Nevertheless, there's a strong chance that you may like what you hear. Another thing, just like Wakfu, the characters' relations are really well developed. So much so that I was caught by surprise when I learned that, in this cartoon for kids from 2013, Simone casually drops that she has a girlfriend. It's one of those funny words from the French language. Let me explain. Contrary to Portuguese and English, for example, that have specific words to designate someone that we are in a relationship with, those words being namorado for boyfriend and namorada for girlfriend. Funny side note. While the word boyfriend is a junction of boy and friend, namorado comes from the verb namorar, which means to date someone or to be in a relationship with someone. Okay, back to French. In French, we have 3 words that can be used for that. We have petit ami, that literally means little friend, but can be used as boyfriend or girlfriend. We have ami, that literally means friend, but according to the context, can be used as boyfriend or girlfriend. And at last, we have the term that Simone uses, copine, that, guess what, means friend, but can be used for girlfriend, with the masculine copain. Extremely simple. Now, and it can sound unexpected, we cannot forget how ordinarily melancholic the story is. You know the word nostalgia, originally used to define the pain of being far away from one's land, Today it exists to define the pain for something even more intangible than any place in the world, the past. And that word defines the whole series. While the events in the present have a peaceful pace without many risks and a tone of definitiveness, like the final moment in a long quest, the ones in the past are exciting, agitated, and distant. All the adventures and events that were lived already passed, just like the people that were met and known, they too already passed. There's a character called Lu, who was present throughout Kerub's whole life, except, ironically, in the present. Lu was many things: adventurer, vigilante, judge, investigator, and on her free time, his fiancée. But then came a day, we don't know why, in which she packed her stuff and left. Maybe she answered the call of duty to face an ancient evil, maybe Kerub wasn't a good husband, or maybe she wished to see the world. We end without knowing. What we do know is that one day she was the most important person in Kerub's life. But today, just like the adventures, she's part of the past. She's just a story. And it makes sense that the series ends showing that all the time lived in Astrub, all that seems so definitive and final, will also be part of the past. It will be just another story. In a calm day, not different from any other, Simone tells Kerub that she'll go to the big city with her girlfriend and, with that, will terminate her contract. There's a great party and a sad farewell, but after that, there's an idea. What if they simply leave too? And just like that, Kerub, Julith, and Luis set sail to the city of Bonta, leaving behind almost a decade of life in Astrub. There's a considerable chance the series leaves you with a relevant question. If things, places, and people that we know will inevitably become stories, those things are actually worth it? It may sound a little bit idealized, but I say they are. The people and adventures which Kerub lived through dramatically change who he ended up being, and at the same time, the tales of that past were instrumental to form the person that Julith will be in the future. Truth or not, the stories that we experience are surprisingly capable of helping us become better people. And talking about surprises, it's funny how life can, just as we believe that the journeys are over, share one last tale. Although it's completely possible to talk about the Dofus movie by its characters, they are, for the most part, really well written, or by its plot, which is quite intriguing, let's talk about the animation. Look, the many works presented thus far have equally beautiful art and animation. The only moments when something drops the ball are in the first episodes of Wakfu, and still, it doesn't stop them from looking good. So, believe me when I say that this movie is gorgeous. Simply gorgeous. The dedication and care put in every single frame is so amazing that you can watch this movie many times and still let some details escape you. The fluidity of the animation gives an epic tone to the fights and manages to make even the most trivial little things be eye-catching. Putting another way, you know the Ghibli movies? Imagine them, but French. And all that quality is used to present an unexpectedly captivating character, the very city of Bonta. You probably already saw her. In Wakfu, we spent a few episodes in the city, but that will take place after the world change, after the time and the waters claimed a considerable part of the land. However, even in that scenario, the city was still big. Now, here, in the peak of its beauty and greatness, she's colossal. The movie does in almost 2 hours of runtime what the previous series did in 52 episodes. After a few minutes, we'll be presented to some of the city's many faces, from its richest neighborhoods to its red light district. And what about the people that call this place home? Well, we have the familiar faces, like Kerubim, Luis, and Julith, but the new characters are excellent additions. For the most part, we have Lilith, Julith's best friend, and Baccara, the younger sister of Bonta's most important figure. Both characters have really interesting personal conflicts, with many layers in their personalities and well-developed arcs. But we also have Kankarkas, the responsible for the almost all the characters are really good. In the totality of the Wakfu/Dofus franchise, the only characters that can be defined as one-dimensional, or as we say in the advanced literature, not very good, are in some episodes of the Dofus series, and in the 4th episode of Wakfu. Seriously, you can skip it. But hey, even they are cool or at least bearable since they are presented for, at maximum, 10 minutes. But here's the thing. Khan is one of the movie's main characters. See, there's this port in the plot called Buffball, and Khan is a really famous player. He sees Baccarat, thinks that she's pretty, and ends up following the main cast. Don't get me wrong, it's a funny premise with a nice potential. The problem is that he has a narcissistic and egocentric personality, which is really annoying and not used for anything interesting. After his personal journey, he doesn't change, he doesn't evolve, he ends up where he began. I'm not saying that every single character always needs to change, but when the starting point is someone so unpleasant, we end up with a character that is annoying and in a certain way bad. He ends up working as a window to what could have been, in case the creators didn't have as much care in the creation of the people of this world as they actually did. So, the movie is quite amazing and is a real tragedy not having received the success that it deserved. But now, for the analysis of the whole franchise, it contributes, together with the previous season, for something extremely important. It gives perspective. The vast majority of Kyuubi's conflict is that he lived and will live for a long time, which made him become nihilistic and distant from things and people. There's an excellent poem called Ozymandias, written by Percy Shelley. It's an account of the ruins of a great statue lost in a desert, which has in its pedestal the following words: "My name is Ozymandias, King of Kings. Look on my works, ye mighty, and despair." One day, that Ozzy there was a great emperor, with a whole kingdom at his disposal. Today, he lives only through unclear narrations, leaving only a decaying statue as proof of his legacy. Oh, and that Percy was married with Mary Shelley, creator of Frankenstein. Really cool, right? Well, Kyuubi might as well have seen that great kingdom being born, lived through its centuries of glory, and finally end up being the person saying that all that remained was a broken statue. The problem is that it's something complicated to understand, since there is a considerable chance that, just like the crew behind this video, you also aren't immortal. You know the notion that it's complicated to comprehend what someone else is feeling without having lived what that person has lived? Then consider this. Throughout the Dofus series and movie, we live that, together with Julith. See, in the movie it's explained how he can live for so long, since Wakfu, where he also shows up, is set a few centuries after the events of everything Dofus related. Thanks to that, we can understand the feelings of characters with such uncommon concepts. We spend 52 episodes in Yastrub, becoming close with the people that live there. We then spend almost 2 hours in Bonta, seeing the city live and understanding a little bit more about its story and its inhabitants. But all that will pass. There will be a day when the life of those that Julith has met up until now, that we have come to know watching the series and the movie, will end. Even the great and mighty city of Bonta, with all its glory and beauty, will be claimed by the time and by the waters. It will be inevitable. Imagine living through that, many times. That's something that can break someone. Actually, that broke Kyuubi. All the people, or at least the vast majority, that we've met in those preludes to Wakfu will have their ends way before Yugo's first steps. Accepting that the time that we spend with someone or something will not be eternal, it's really difficult, as much as it is to accept that our time will not be either. That's the burden which characters like Julith carry, the same one that Yugo and Adamai will eventually have to carry too. We can find comfort in thinking that dangers and tragedies are distant things, as if they were far away, be it in distance or time. But what happens then, when disaster strikes our door, or even of those we love? We could say, without being entirely wrong, that in the stories about great journeys comes a moment, normally near the end, when all the problems and challenges from the beginning of the adventure, which were absolutely important back then, now look so trivial and irrelevant. At this point, our heroes already face villains whose victory would be a figuratively and literal end of the world. But what happens when they must face something more intangible, more inevitable? You guys remember Ogrest Chaos, which slowly and discreetly takes parts of the world? So, it arrived at the Sadidas Kingdom. It's interesting to see how the characters deal with a threat which, apparently, they aren't capable to face. And that's one of the things that this special 3-episode season aims to explore. We even have a subplot that puts an empathic light on Prince Armand, Amalia's brother. He tries desperately to build a dam to halt the waters advance. Everyone knows it's useless, even he knows that. However, he also knows that is all that he can do against something he can fully comprehend. And far from that, we have a forced wedding. Amalia finds herself obliged to marry a count in exchange for assistance for her kingdom. We witness how she deals with the kind of obligation that no one deserves to go through, while she has to suppress the feelings that she carries for Hugo, who also shares the same emotions. But not everything's bad news. Having passed 6 years since the last season, the family of Tristepan and Evangeline got a little bit bigger. Making a literary move that we like to call Boruto but actually good, they had 2 kids, Eleli and Flopin, who are extremely charismatic characters to watch, contrary to a certain anime. Except you, Himawari, you are a treasure and the plot should be only about you. There's a really nice scene that happens after some revelations. A part of the group must face some adversaries. Among them is a guy named Percival. Back then, right in the beginning of the series, we find a village of hydric beings, which has a statue built after a legend, that Percival. This fight represents the moment where we are in the story. What was before myth or legend is just a normal day, only another adversary. The logical conclusion of this power scale can be seen in the last episode, in which the characters put their grown-up pants and try to punch the face of the personification of one of the greatest legends of this world. But before that, there's a personal conflict to be solved. The 2 main brothers have opposite views of how to solve the situation. Hugo will try to use all the artifacts that were acquired throughout the series together, so that maybe he can have a chance against Ogrest. Adamine finds it crazy. The main threat of the 2nd season was that the Elia Cube, in the hands of someone who knows how to use it, would destroy the world. Imagine what could happen in the hands of a 19-year-old. There's a literal fight. Then Adamine gives an ultimatum. It will be him or the power. Hugo chooses the power, and Adamine leaves. That argument actually sets an excellent characterization later on. But right now, there's a world to save. And with the power that we're dealing with, the sky is no longer the limit. And, in fact, it will be a battle among the stars, with the world underneath their feet. It's a visual spectacle, but at the same time, quite funny when you stop to think about it. You people remember, way back in this analysis, when the most important thing was a baker competition? Well, the guy of sad story appears here, looking at the sky and seeing something that he does not comprehend. And after prevailing in a combat that will forever change the world, what do? Well, that season ends how it began, with a wedding. We see Tristepan and Evangeline becoming friends, lovers, parents, and now married. This moment actually represents an evolution for the characters and their feelings, all the while being so goofy. You see characters that we came to know throughout the adventures, some using the same costumes as always. Even the cliché of the person officializing the wedding being someone from the series happens here. It's funny, goofy, beautiful, and honest. Just like the franchise. With the greatest threats to the world finally defeated, the only things that our heroes have to fear are, well, themselves. Saying that the 3rd season of Wakfu is polemic among its fanbase would be simplifying too much. The direction taken by the series and the characterization of the characters are topics of heated discussions in the most mature places one can imagine, internet forums. Regardless of one's opinion, something that is undeniably different and can be considered as a reason for the problems that do, in fact, exist, is the structure. It only has 13 episodes, instead of the usual 26. The reason behind that is the change of the French broadcaster responsible for financing part of the show. When changing from France 3 to France 4, the series saw itself with a significantly smaller budget and having to adapt to a new format. And talking about adapting to a new reality, the season begins with the characters at their lowest points until now. Hugo and Joel try, without success, to find Anamai. Amalia is already mourning the imminent death of her father, and Eva, her unborn son, and Flopin are kidnapped. What immediately catches the attention in this chapter of the saga is the tone. While still finding time for good humor and kind moments, a heavy cloud hovers over the characters. Most of them facing dilemmas and threats that can be solved by a simple fight. So there's nothing wrong in trying to fight against the only thing that can be, in fact, solved by a fight. The journey takes the characters to a tower of impossible proportions, where they need to ascend its 12 floors and face a villain that, until now, is unknown, but knows them quite well. Yes, our heroes use the Knights of the Zodiac strategy to save the day. But more than a thematically and aesthetically interesting place, the tower gives the characters the opportunity to face aspects of themselves, either old or recent, that they rather avoid accepting or facing. Pampan and, surprisingly, Ruel must deal with the consequences of actions and decisions made in the past, which, even though they don't represent who they are right now, affected the lives of other people. And while in the subject of the character's drama, we have the quite peculiar way the series approaches the relationship between Hugo and Amalia. Just like what happened with Pampan and Eva in the first season, the existence of a romance between the two is undeniable, but making a contrapoint to the couple that already exists, the animation shows how not understanding your feelings and not knowing how to externalize them can negatively affect the relationship. There's a really nice scene in which Hugo tries to articulate the reasons why they shouldn't be together. Even though the conclusions he arrives at do make sense, it's visible he does not believe that. You know when you start to look for a plausible reason to justify a moment of emotional uncertainty or a choice that you aren't entirely sure is the right one. It's rare to see characters acting such a humanly fallible way. Another interesting counterpoint is made using Adamai and Hugo with the villains of the first season, Nox and Kyubi respectively. In one hand, we have the young dragon walking the same path of a man led to madness by grief. He starts taking actions that he knows aren't correct, believing to be doing a greater good. In the other, Hugo, similar to what happened with Kyubi, begins not only to feel the weight of the decisions he made throughout his journey, but also sees his immortality as something that will stop him from creating bonds, especially with the one he loves. It's fascinating to see how the different characters' dramas develop and culminate in a fight against a new villain, Oropo, who represents the many qualities and problems of the third season. Okay, his concept's really cool. He's a temporal anomaly, who only came to be thanks to the previous events of the saga, and, technically, he's a copy of Hugo. But more than appearance, Oropo received feelings and thoughts that aren't his, belonging to his creator. So, who is he really? Are his feelings really his? How does he deal with the notion of sharing the emotions of someone who is eternal, while himself is not? All those doubts give birth to a feeling of vengeance to what he considers to be a divine injustice. And since the gods undoubtedly exist, they will pay for what they allow to happen, even if he must go to their realm. Actually, that's exactly his plan. All that sounds pretty intriguing, and the series even shows how strong or weak is Oropo's relation with his allies. However, do you know how that is revealed? Through a long expositive dialogue. He stops and tells his story. I'm not saying that's wrong or the worst thing ever, but the series itself already found more elegant ways to treat its villains. But the complicated part comes now. You know what a retcon or retroactive continuity is? It's when a work changes facts that already happened, normally to serve a present or future event. Still not getting? Are you familiar with Metal Gear? It's an espionage-related franchise. Well, saying that the games are only about that is like saying that Wakfu is just a fantasy story. But what you need to know is that there's a lot of games and they tend to be quite good. And it's a huge fan of said narrative technique. Let me explain. In one game, a politician that we must save dies. Then, another game reveals that said politician was, in fact, the comic relief of another game. Then, in another game, we find out that that guy, who was the politician that secretly was the comic relief that died by a heart attack, which was caused by a virus, kinda was part, all along, of the organization which kinda is the series' main villain.
Who are the Patriots? Who are the Patriots? Answer me!
It makes sense in context, trust me. So, not satisfied by having Oropo as the most recent villain, the series goes out of its way to reveal that he had a finger in almost all the great tragedies of the world. Remember Ogrest Chaos, the badly explained event which, when you understand what happened, proves to be a tragic and empathic tale? Nah, Oropo was there. Remember how Nox accidentally found the alien cube, showing how this world is capable of being cruel and indifferent? Nah, it was Oropo all along. The quality of the series and the stories being told is so high that even with those plot points a tad bit overly convenient and far-fetched, they maintain their care and beauty. But this moment does tarnish the merit of the season a little bit. One can blame the considerable reduced budget and time frame that Ankama had to work with in order to produce this arc. Nevertheless, the problems are indeed visible, but it manages to surpass them and deliver an excellent saga. And even Oropo, with all the problematics in the way he's presented, ends up being an intriguing character, with a complete journey and arc. On the other hand, our hero's adventure ends in an unexpected fashion. They arrive at the realm of the gods, their problems were faced, and the emotional wounds begin to heal. They are together. Everything's going to be okay. but the realm of the gods lies in ruins. Something deeply wrong and unknown happened here. But as I said, they are together. Everything will be fine. Will it not? Time went by. Soon we'd get a new season. Surely soon. And in that moment, the characters started to change. Forget Hugo, Adamai, Nox and the rest. Now we have Ankama, Netflix and France Télévisions. The real world had bigger challenges than anything that the World of 12 could present. Even though it was a considerable success in its new home, the age range of the viewers, from 11 to 14 years old, was considered too old for what the channel wanted, and that put the plans into hot water. But not everything was lost. Anthony Hu, one of the founders of Ankama, was already working on a 4th and 5th season for the series, and with Netflix about to give it the biggest global release window yet, surely things would turn out well. Unfortunately, things didn't turn out well. Since it wasn't able to achieve a good result in the streaming service, the platform did not renew the series for another season, and with France 4, broadcaster of the last season, giving up on animations, our friends are still stuck in the realm of the gods. That wasn't the first time that Ankama faced the sad end of one of its creations. Kerub's Bazaar, or Au Trésor de Kerubim, the series with the little Jojo, only came to be because an about to be produced and long-awaited project, Welsh and Cheddar, was cancelled for being too mature. There's a post on Anthony's blog, in which he comments how the Wakfu series is a miracle for the French television, not only because of its quality, but also for its themes and target audience. It's a fantasy quite different from the standard, and the themes addressed are as mature as they are universal, without forgetting to be funny, obviously. Something made with so much care and dedication, so unique, having an end so tragic, would be too painful. It was really painful, at least for me, and certainly it was to Ankama. But they wouldn't let it end like this. In July of 2020, they will try one last time, a crowdfunding to make at least 3 episodes of the last season. To do so, they need 100,000 euros. 100,000 for 3 new episodes of a French cartoon that was, for all intents and purposes, cancelled because it didn't have its place in the world. In July of the year of one of the worst epidemics of the modern age. Well, no one can say that they didn't try. And would you look at that, those beautiful people made it. And made 1,522,816 euros. What was supposed to be a short saga of 3 episodes became a full season, not only with 13 episodes, but also 2 specials. Against all odds, the series will go on. This hiatus of almost 4 years at the time of writing will be just that, a hiatus. But today, the end of this adventure is still a mystery. It's possible that we witness one of the greatest endings of the history of animation, or it can be a total flop. Well, who knows, maybe it will be something forgettable that doesn't offend nor delight no one. Frankly, the very existence of the ending will surpass whatever level of quality it will achieve. Be either good or bad, it will happen. That's already a victory. What's the reason behind all this? Why dedicate more than an hour to talk about a French cartoon? Because the franchise deserves it, and it should get more attention. It's a great injustice that the series is not as popular as it could be, so much so that if you didn't know about it and, thanks to this video, you decided to give it a chance, first of all, thank you oh so very much, you beautiful person, and, well, this video did its part. I intentionally left out many events, characters and stories, so that you could still be surprised during your first watch. Actually, that's another great quality of the animation. Many fantastical concepts which are part of the franchise's world, although extremely relevant, are secondary when compared to the personal and humane motivations of the characters. That's one of the things that makes it unique and inspiring. Just like the way Kerubim's tales inspire Julith to become the person he ended up being, the franchise inspired me to create something to share it. If you'd like my opinion, that's something quite powerful. I'm not going to pretend that it's perfect. Just like anything created by human beings, it's something with flaws. The 3rd season as a whole has a pace that is a tad bit more accelerated than it should have been, and it concludes in an open-ended way, which will, fortunately, have an ending. Besides, although the series exceeded expectations with the representation of Simone and her relationship, it has 2 characters in the Sarada Kingdom who I bet that all the script had to demonstrate their personalities were the 3 letters to form the word gay. However, all in all, the series managed to be something quite special. I hope, honestly, that as you gave a chance to this video, you give one to the franchise. Thank you very much for your time. I mean it. Oh, and if you want, follow us on Twitter or Instagram, and subscribe here in the channel. But only if you want it, of course.